time for our first solo performer of the evening. Now, Jill Levy will be familiar to you already if you've come along to these evenings before. She's a Glasgow-based violinist and singer who variously teaches those things, plays in a ceilidh band, can be found offering all sorts of wonderful musical opportunities via a website called singingfiddles.com, where you can get starter lessons, gift vouchers. It's that time of the year, isn't it? Join a women's choir, all sorts of things. There's more than I can seriously mention here in a short space of time, but check it out at singingfiddles.com. We have an evening which is bringing together poetry and music from around the world. Rhymes from home, we've called it, and rhymes which have been brought to these shores and to this city and to this environs. We've got a very good cross-section of music and poetry for you this evening. But I think it's really appropriate to open with something by Scotland's greatest bard, with apologies to Jerry Luce, who is a very great Scottish bard and is going to do something for us later on. But I think we need to give a little bit of deference to Robert Burns. The thing that Jill's going to perform for you is called The Slave's Lament. Now, it's about a person who's taken from their home in Senegal and sold into slavery in Virginia. And while we're thinking about home and about people who have come here because they want to be in Glasgow, or people who've fled their home because they've been persecuted or whatever it happens to be, it's also a time to reflect on people whose choice of home was not down to them at all. And this is something that obviously has gone on for many centuries and still goes on today. So a really poignant piece of work, the poem written by Robert Burns and then set to music. And as I was saying to Jill earlier on, many people did set Burns' poetry, including Beethoven, along the way. So please welcome Jill Levy.
It was in sweet Senegal that my foes did me enthrall, for the land of Virginia, Virginia, torn from that lovely shore, I might never see it more. And alas, I am weary, weary, oh. All on that charming coast is no bitter snow and frost, like the land of Virginia, Virginia. Their streams forever flow, and their flowers forever grow. And alas, I am weary, weary, oh. The burden I must bear, while the cruel scourge I fear, in the land of Virginia, Virginia. And I think on friends most dear, with a bitter, bitter tear. And alas, I am weary, weary, oh.
Now, this evening is about the poetry of language, and we contend that to enjoy a performance, a poem, a song, you don't necessarily have to understand all the words. If you just listen to the sound, the sonic poetry, the evocation of language, and the heart and soul that goes into the performance, that's something that carries itself, and is something that's, I think, very, very important in our community, to listen to those things and to be aware of them. And so I welcome next a wonderful bunch of people who are going to sing for you, and they are our Roma choir, please.
Okay, so we've got a band today, which are going to perform traditional Roma song, the original from Slovakia, but they found their home in Glasgow. They like it here, and they're going to sing something nice for you. Okay.
mande pale, pava tu te me mera. Amini omyori, amini waji. Ake mande pale, pava tu te me mera. Pava tu te me mera mera. Jai Medica. Hoy te diga me llama, me mistura chaye chubida. Bala tu te me mera, jani me diga diga. Hoy te diga me llama, me mistura chaye chubida. Amiri omyori, amiri waji. Mande pale, pava tu te me mera. Amiri omyori, amiri waji. Anki mande pale, pava tu te me mera. Pava tu te me mera mera. Jani tu chaye medica. Hoy te diga me llama, te buscaré chaye chumida. Pava tu te me mera mera, chaye medica. Hoy te diga me llama, te buscaré chaye chumida. Ishuka, ishuka, otimiri kiyori. Venga, miri, yucaro miori. Alma te shara girama, approchame mañanero va. Yo te vale como si mangue, me mire chavinga. Y me shara girama. Approchame mañanero va. Y hoy te vale como si mangue, y mire chavinga. Ishuka, ondi mi giroi, venga, mire, yucaro miori. Baila que me sale girama, y approchame me janero va. Y hoy te vale como si mangue, y mire chavinga. Baila que me llama girama, y approchame me janero va. Y hoy te vale como si mangue, y mire chavinga.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Jana Pushkova singing, Mr. Milan Lako and Mr. Emil Gaji.
Thank you, and let's not forget the able assistance of Miro on both tambourine and introduction there. Thank you very much, Miro. Next to Juana Adcock, who made her home in Scotland in 2007, in Glasgow in 2007, from Monterrey in Mexico, a poet and translator. She tells me in English, Spanish and Spanglish. He says, sounds delightful. And Juana studied at Glasgow University. Her work's been published in such fine places as Magama Poetry, Gutter, Glasgow Review of Books, Fourfold, Inventory Journal, and Be the First to Like This, Anthology of New Scottish Poetry. She has, in this year of 2014, had her first full volume of her own poetry published in Mexico, and she has it with her tonight. It's called Manca, and Juana will read now from this book. Please welcome Juana.
So the subject of home is quite an important thing to me. I wrote this book, it's basically about being away from home and being unable to help with all the violence and atrocities that are going on there at the moment. So it's very important for me to be here tonight, and it's a great honor. And I really want to thank everyone who made it happen, and to you guys for being here. Esquirlas. Y su voz, quemadura meteorito, estalla cascarón, metálico huevo, menudo inocente que salió cocido, charca colorida, un iris salpicando la banqueta. Me mataron, ay, a mis hijos. Implora materno, colgándose del faldón militar, golpe de culata en el estómago y salir vomitando las recalcitrantes laderas. Zambrano lo había previamente pavimentado todo. Y nosotros nos callamos a lo uno solo. No vayamos a amanecer doblados en un tambo, sosa cáustica, astilla los huesos, espuma las vísceras. 4,000 pesos quincenales. Hasta el niño de 12 que enseña la técnica del descabezado, a los que yo no sé, que yo no tengo experiencia, que me subieron el sueldo a 4,000 pesos quincenales por haber participado en balaceras y persecuciones. Hasta esa sensación de calor y calosfrío ignorado, placa de metal enterrada en el esófago, de blanquinegros pájaros que piden más ojos, más fosas, y esta nuestra herencia, una red de agujeros en cada mano por donde se nos cuela la esperanza, por donde alguien nos dijo, has de sufrir, por donde metimos los dedos y aunque sangrábamos, no creíamos más que los que nos contaban las pantallas. El llanto se extiende, los charcos gotean ecos estrepitosos. Comenzamos el proceso de olvidar historia, nombre, dirección, lugar de origen, objetivos. La verdad espejo, las palabras óxido. Time gaping with expectation. The hour wavers and glances by. No es al amanecer, es un encuentro armado, es rojo ensanchando pavimento, a la explanada en blanco, al lugar donde todos te dijeron y nadie te escuchó porque ni tú te oyeras. Comenzamos por las orillas, levantando la cascarita, dejando salir pus, excrescencias. Se hace más gruesa, vamos quitando capas, geológica epidermis, desollando esa red que es un musgo quedo, dejando remojar fibras en un río de saliva universal, desde donde he sangrado gotas, malogrado, abonado el trigo, la hiedra, desde donde he sido parcela, toda ubérrima, donde rumian las cabras. Cortina de metal. En el negocio, la cortina media asta, agita el viento corrugado. Atrás vemos pasear cuerpos desmantelados, tan solo sus cuerpos, degollados. La cortina, porque no toleramos que nos miren contar centavos, porque cerramos los espejos y nos pensamos otros. Camiones descarriados, porque también nuestras cabezas, también la niña se asoma. ¿Cuántas veces no dijimos, por aquí una cuna que acontece, por aquí una que no se ha ido, por aquí una reja secreta abrazada por raíces, por las ramas, como si el árbol también se esforzara en arrancarla? Esto no es lo que yo quise, no es lo que yo pedí, no es el huerto de heridas entreabiertas. Troncos y troncos pasan, sin cabeza ni raíz. El carnicero pasea también a su nieta, lenta a la banqueta. Las botas de hule arteriales, los venenos se han vertido. Es una parte del tronco de un árbol unida a la raíz cuando se cortan por el pie, tatuada en el tobillo años antes de descubrir que la abuela había talado un sicomoro. Determined to remove it scientifically by putting salt in it. Hay que aceptarlo tal cual, sin sentirse la víctima caída desnuda entre las ortigas, toda estática televisiva. I want to dedicate the next poem to the 43 students who were kidnapped and murdered by the Mexican government last month. We are now #1 in the world for the industry of kidnapping, I read in the paper, but I've fled, porque no quiero saber, I don't want to hear. que me quiten all the numbers. Knowledge can only take place within cierto radius, que se extiende por mis limbs hasta mis toes and fingers. And to those within the reach of mis toes and fingers, of my dedos and dedos, uncut by gardening shears, unused for ransom, fingers I can drum en la mesa while I gaze out the window onto my leafy street, wondering whether la razón for my depression tal vez sea algo en mi dieta, or the weather, perhaps. Y ya ni me acuerdo de how I walked down las escaleras del metro, and I dodged a beggar making a pitiful scene of herself, kneeling onto broken glass and smearing bloody broken glass on her arms and cheeks, and how I never used to notice que el bombardeo de tragedies had become so competitive. Todo es poesía. If I was truly listening, el mundo sería unbearable. Thanks.
Very beautiful reading there from Juana, and if you want to get a hold of the book, I'm sure there are means of finding, just ask her. It's something you should have. Let us call next upon Mary Forbes. This was a woman whom we met first and saw performing first at an event put together by another wonderful organisation last month on the 10th of October in the Garnet Hill Multicultural Centre. There was a ceilidh organised by Migrant Voice. If you're not familiar with Migrant Voice, it is an organisation which promotes positive views of migrants to the UK in the press. It's a sort of antidote to the Daily Mail, and we love it all the more for that. And it was a great evening of music and dancing and song, and Mary came along and sang something, and immediately we heard the passion in her performance and thought, let's ask her along to our Rhymes from Home event. Mary is a woman of many talents. She is a former Justice of the Peace. She is currently a paralegal by day and learning to play the saxophone by other hours, not at the time when she's a paralegal. Or maybe she takes the saxophone in and gives a blast of it in the lawyer's office. I do not know. But she sings in Yoruba, which is one of the Nigerian languages, and she's going to sing something for us now. And she's singing something which African women would sing to their children in the morning. This is called, and I should have checked the pronunciation with her first, Aye Adba will be my attempt at it without checking first, which means the dove. Go meet your day, follow the doves. Taking flight now, please welcome Mary Forbes.
Thank you. It's a short song, so you'll be happy. Don't go on long. Oh, Juatimwa, oh, Juatimawi, hile, yo. Ayadaba, ye, yadaba, ayadaba, ti follow, ke, wa, bali mi, yo. Oh, Juatimwa, morire, ho. Oh, Juatimwa, oh, Juatima, wihile, yo. Ayadaba, ye, yadaba, ayadaba, ti follow, ke, wa, bali mi, yo. Oh, Juatimwa, morire, ho. Hawiti wasa yo. Oh, Juatimwa, morire ho. Thank you.
Mary Forbes, we salute you. We're going to divide the poetry and musical performances into two halves. which will be intersected by a performance from our band. And if you haven't yet filled in any of the little bits of paper with thoughts on home, or if the book has not been passed you yet, the little cork-covered book with thoughts of home, you might consider putting a word or a line or two into any of these things with your thoughts on that in the evening. That would be great and much appreciated. But now let's welcome back Miro and Sadie and Jill and Wilf and Stepan. Thank you to the band, more if we go on, and you will be able to join in with them later on, I think. There will be joining in happening, we hope. Now, we're into the second half of the show. Let me return once again to a thought of the migrant voice, Kaylee, at the Multicultural Centre in Garnet Hill last month. I had been admiring an interesting garment which was flying around the dance floor, and it was this woolly scarf which had very long tassels, and when it's sort of flying around the dance floor, it really projects something. I thought, that's a great looking thing. And at the end of the night, we were saying goodnight to people and so on, and I met the guy who was wearing the scarf. And I said to him, I really like your scarf. And he said, I would like to give it to you. I was like, well, I can't just take your scarf. He said, no, I would like to give it to you. And when you wear it, you think of Ali. And ever since then, I have worn it. I had it on in London last month. I've worn it. It's a lovely woolly scarf. He told me it was quite typically Iranian pattern. And I've had so many people admiring it, and everyone who's admired it has been told about my newfound scarf vending friend, Ali. So Ali Tupa is going to sing something for us now, which is a song of freedom and hope for the peoples in his land, a sort of love song for freedom, I guess you could say. Please welcome Ali Tupa.
مرغ سحر ناله سر کن داغ مرا تازه تر کن زاه شرر بار این نفس را برشکن و زی روز بر کن بلبل پربسته ز کنج قفس درآ نغمه آزادی نوح بشر سرا و از نفسی عرصه این خاک توده را پر شرر کن پر شرر کن ظلم ظالم جور سیاد آشیانم داده بر باد ای خدا ای فلک ای طبیعت شام تاریک ما را سحر کن ای خدا ای فلک ای طبیعت شام تاریک ما را سحر کن نوبهار است گل به بار است ابر چشمم ژاله بار است این قفس چون دلم تنگ و تار است شعله فکن در قفس سیاه آتشین جانب عاشق نگه ای تازه گل از این بیشتر کن، بیشتر کن، بیشتر کن. مرغ بیدل شرح هجران مختصر مختصر کن.
Ali, thank you so much. Jerry Luce describes himself as a slow-moving nomad. Places he's called home include England, Ireland, Spain, Morocco, briefly, and of course Scotland, where he currently resides on a boat at Bowling. His awards include those from, deep breath here, Creative Scotland, the Society of Authors, and the Robert Louis Stevenson Award. In addition to his books of poetry, Jerry's written plays for the radio and been involved in several films too, so a bit too much of a list to represent adequately here. His sixth collection of poems is Fault Line, singular, published recently by Vagabond Voices. And Jerry's home on the Clyde coast is not far away from a different sort of home, the location of the nuclear base at Faslane. Fault Line can be viewed as a series of separate poems or a bigger whole on the subject of the dividing line between humanity and the environment, of the Gerlach's contradictory ambience of natural beauty and weapons that could annihilate it. The book blends the Scots, English and Gaelic tongues in very thought-provoking and evocative ways. And reading now from his own Fault Line, Jerry Luce.
Thanks, John. Actually, after an introduction like that, I think maybe I shouldn't bother reading at all and just leave it right there. But I was delighted to be invited here. The last time I was here, it was all sort of whirring and whizzing and banging of gongs, and I was hoping that might happen this evening, but apparently not. So I'll keep it short as well. I'm going to read from another collection before I read from Fault Line. Irish and Scottish poetry is kind of full of the longing for home, because so many Irish people and so many Scottish people were forced to emigrate, to go overseas from Ireland because of the great famine, the potato famine, and the clearances in Scotland. And there's always this yearning in Irish and Scottish poetry for a place called home, which of course in many instances no longer exists. We nearly did a deal on the mare and her foal at foot. After haymaking, rain starting, Tim O'Sullivan drove off on his cabless tractor. Of course, he took my old duffel coat for its hood. In the tractor shed, a wren built her nest in the coat pocket. On the following summer ripening, Tim rode across the bog to return it. Nest, eggs, chicks, how could he disturb her? 30 years and 5 floors up on the hallway in the pot with a clump of fern, a city pigeon has laid 2 alabaster eggs on a small clutching of red and yellow cut electrical wires. And I cannot go out there, even for soft spring rain. Yeah, the great hunger. Anybody who writes poetry knows what the great hunger is, that's for sure. And I did a lot of other things in my life to kind of, as we all do, to make ends meet. Happy to be on Kelly's roof. I was painting his roof. Happy to be on Kelly's roof. Last night, drinking tea, the whiskey long gone, weighing words. This morning, on the roof, eyeballs dancing in the iron heat. Seeing south, top of the ladder, 5,000 acres of bog. Remote holdings, silent days, a long way from the poets. And yeah, the new book. Again, I suppose it's about loss of language, loss of culture, the Gaelic, the Scots, loss of territory, ceded over to various military forces, and now, as was mentioned, Faslane, Coolport, home to essentially weapons of mass destruction. It happens. We're trying to get rid of it. We might have succeeded last month. We didn't quite. The fight goes on. About right for these parts, mostly birch, some oak, my living room where the white hind has scented me, though I'm glassed in standard class on the halted train through Glen Douglas. She follows my gaze over her shoulder to hillside bunkers, trots downwind in the direction of the sea's drifting foam specks, fast lane, while an owl edits my sleep, an object. Consider these lilies, what you talk about when you talk aesthetics, and these sweet coils, woodbine, razor wire, my fixed point of the hills grasping peerless sunlight. States of matter, halogen lights safely do away with night and day, abolish the moon. Barn owl snatches song, all 24 hours now. A siren, rock to my hard place. These men talk to their lapels. Meniscus, mergansers dive, see the bridge, see the water, see the bow wave turning. The poor boys of a religious order are in town for a drink and a walk. Their fathers, who are not priests but workers, pushed buttons with 4 fingers, detonated. Trees, ocean swell. Why should I leave? Kemp said. Why should I travel? I don't even know my own garden. And still the seedling oaks come. Each spring, Gahoons displacing Gregors, Campbells once more selling stolen waters to conquering navies for their fleets. Boreal bright ice, swans wander the strand, seals stravage the firth, swans paddle the firth, a driftwood forest, salt sparks the firebox, time looks so, speech is stolen from truth. And final poem that is final. Before the torrents of rain, ba moghaish, ba mahuash, before the landslides, ruin and scarab, shkervui, leaving aside the multitudes of frogs, the hen house, the deer house, Maggie's Barnes Hole, Meckie's Point, now silenced, a people of the sea, the sea. The mast of the riverside, Butterbur, named and folded back and back into the hill, into missiles' lodgings. They're not benign. Black helicopters have no ovipositors. And the one for the bird with 2 notes, cuckoo flower. Oh, my slender gun, my blinding sun.
Jerry Luce, a pleasure to have you with us. For quite a long time, one of the many and various things I did in radio was read the news on the BBC. One of the things you have to do there is take on pronunciations of many an interesting name, and so you have a certain adeptness in that area, but sometimes there is a challenge, and I've got a challenge with the next name I need to pronounce here. And I shall come to that shortly. But I sometimes describe myself as a frozen northerner. The idea of going abroad in search of heat and sun and craving the heat, lying on a beach for a fortnight, baking, not for me, thank you very much. And I think as a child, the evocative nature of mysterious lands to the north and mysterious places to the east had a bit more lure to my imagination. And one of them was initially sparked by listening to a bit of orchestral music by a Danish composer called Carl Nielsen, which was called An Imaginary Trip to the Faroe Islands. Now, even the title of it and the cover of the album is enough to spark the imagination, but certainly did so for me. Now, I'm very pleased to say that we have a Faroe Islander with us in Glasgow and with us tonight here in Sharmanka, and she is Camilla Dvangsviertel. I don't know how much of a mess of that I made, but she can come up and correct me. She's in her final year of studies at Glasgow University. She's a player of flute and a fine singer too, and Camilla will sing for us something which in translation is called Faroe Islands, My Mother. It's a love song to her first home, performed tonight in her second one. Now, these islands do not often register in the world of politics and power. Instead, their residence is a more peaceful and poetic one. Their climate is known for the arrival of sudden ceilings of fog, even on an otherwise sunny day. And Camilla cites the quality she describes as the melancholy smile to be one which remains attractive to the poet. Please welcome Camilla Dvangsviertel. Or something like that. And it should be...
Dvangsviertel.
Förjar mun moer tut signa ja navn och hjärtan och runare ständer tut sorg blöja brås tut mjörska loft drå tuin son kjolt vi sol gilt och stränder. Und du vær alt bjart som hugsa kan, ein blomma fra paradisstrondon, ein perla mot ödlon i heimen och vær, ja valda ui tjon och London. Takk for her kanska stoltare lä at kveie av brymdon og tåron, men kunde jeg elska til hakre nu mot frilusta heim mot den norre.
It's well worth mentioning that next March, the eyes of the world, certainly the world of science and interest in astronomy and so on, will descend upon the Faroe Islands. On the 20th of March, there is a total eclipse. And needless to say, a total solar eclipse that is, needless to say, if you were wanting to try and go and see that, places to go and do so have been booked up years in advance. Whether there will be a ceiling of cloud that will descend over it and obliterate it from view, I don't know, but it will certainly darken the skies, and it will do so here as well. So if you see the solar eclipse in action around this part of the world, think of the folks in the Faroe Islands next 20th of March. Last March, a couple of months when I wasn't here to present these first Thursdays, I was actually very far away working in the south of Russia and the coast of the Black Sea. And I wasn't able to be around for a couple of performances, which I've heard about repeatedly since, how good they were. And one of them, the one in March, was the amalgam of Camilla, whom you've just heard, and Ruta, whom you're going to hear next. And Ruta Kukelskite is from Lithuania, and she and her friends, who are Kristina and Singita, are genuine fans of folk music, all of which they've learned from random forest folk festivals or each other. And here in Glasgow, they've performed in locations varying in their atmosphere and acoustics, from the echoing cloisters of Glasgow University. I saw and heard that performance. It was wonderful indeed. To riverbanks and modern galleries, Ruta describes their performance as folk meditation. She says it's really about experiencing the performance rather than being an outside observer. Well, they're going to sing some rhymes from home about a cosmic sycamore tree, which seems wonderfully appropriate in a place which is based so much on the wood carving skills of Eduard Bersudsky. And of course, at the back of the gallery here, we have Eduard's magnificent Tree of Life. If you haven't seen it, go and have a look at that thing. And the cosmic sycamore tree in this song is depicted as a tree of life that symbolises the connection between the three dimensions of birth, life and death. In the roots of the tree there is music, in the middle of it bees are buzzing, and on the top of its branches falcons' children in the nest. Please welcome Singita, Christina and Ruta.
Skambantys kankleliai,
Slaunasai žolyne rūge,
per vidurį dūzgiančios bitelės.
Slaunasai žolyne rūge,
O viršūnėj sakalo vaikeliai,
slaunasai žolyne rūge,
ir atjojom brolalių pulkelis.
Slaunasai žolyne rūge,
Paklausykit skambančių kanklelių.
slaunasai žolyne rūge,
Paklausykit dūzgiančių bitelių.
slaunasai žolyne rūge,
Pažiūrėkit sakalo vaikelių.
slaunasai žolyne rūge,
Dėl tėvulio skambantys kankleliai.
slaunasai žolyne rūge,
Dėl tėvulio dūzgiančios bitelės.
slaunasai. 'Slaunasai žolyne rūge, 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 'Slaunasai žolyne rūge dėl dievulio sakalo vaikeli.